Oh man, I'm getting so tired. I'm just gonna pull over here and get a little shut-eye. Oh, Jesus, what was that?
What the hell? Oh, that's just great. That's just great. The orbital suspender's busted. Oh, God.
Well, I didn't even see you.
Yeah, well, it's called a cloaking device, okay? Sweet Galacto, this is a mess.
Well, look, man, let's just exchange insurance information and let's just get this thing taken care of. Here's my insurance card. Let me see yours.
Okay, look, let me just cut it straight with you, okay? I don't have a license, okay? I got busted a few times, drinking while saucing. The Galactic Alliance has taken my license. Oh man, if I get busted, oh man, it's gonna be 30 days in the dehydration tank for me, oh God.
I'm sorry, man, but I don't know what else to do here. Look at my truck.
Oh, I'm so God. Okay, look, where are we? Okay, Roswell's not too far from here. I don't know, if you could maybe give me a lift. I don't have AAA.
Look, man, let's just wait till the cops get here and we'll figure this whole thing out.
Whoa, no cops. No cops, all right? I can't do cops.
We gotta call the cops. It was an accident.
What?
All right, what seems to be the problem here? Oh my God, what the hell is that?
Oh my God,
The hell is that thing? The hell?
You won't take me alive.
What the hell?
God.
Oh, God. What the hell was that thing?
I have no idea, but look what he did to my truck. I just hope Progressive covers electrogravitic damage.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
And you have arrived at the street that most truckers fear to tread, where truckers would rather die than ship their loads. And that's Creep Street, baby. The most haunted street in the US of A, if not the Milky Way galaxy. But of course, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast. We got a TikTok that we're getting more active on. It's also at Creep Street Podcast. And of course, if our schedule just isn't enough for you, we were bi-weekly. We're kind of starting to gear up to go more weekly, I think. But still, if that is not enough for you, if you need more Creep Street shot straight to your veins, well, guess what? The next truck stop is coming up. And it's called patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast. We got all sorts of goodies over there. Stuff building out the world of Moonset and Creep Street. We've got bonus episodes. We did a 27 Club episode that was kind of essentially a part 4 of our rock and roll in the occult, essentially.
Yeah. That one was super interesting.
Absolutely. And remember, no matter what tier you subscribe to, $2, $5, $10, that means you instantly get all of the content for that tier that's ever been made. So like, we're talking, I think August of 2020 was when we started our Patreon. So no matter what tier you choose, you're going to have like 4.5 years of that content all of a sudden. So think about it like that. It's not just suddenly you're just then starting to get it that much. I mean, you've got a back catalog of really cool stuff to go check out. So go check that out. But folks, Creep Street, let's keep those engines revving. Let's keep them revving. Let's keep it in high gear. Let's crank those RPMs. Yeah. And make sure to keep your eyes peeled, because this next episode is going to take us deep into the heart of the unknown. Maybe the scariest story in this whole thing is a Michigan-based trucker tale. So very cool, very cool. In fact, in some ways, some of the earliest paranormal stories that I ever heard really came straight from trucker tales that were broadcast over the airwaves while spending nights navigating long, empty roads. Growing up, our family, Gage included, we would take countless trips sometimes down from Michigan to Arkansas. And along the way, if we were driving through the night, because it's, it's like a 10 or 12 hour drive. And if you go through the night, we would tune into Coast to Coast AM, hosted by the legendary Art Bell. Art Bell's since passed away. I think it's George Norrie now, who's also great. But yes, we would listen to those great tales, and it was those late night broadcasts where I first heard these eerie, unfiltered accounts from truckers who had stories of everything from strange lights chasing after their rigs, to phantom passengers appearing in their mirrors, to strange voices coming in over their CB radios. There was something about hearing those tales firsthand and in real time, especially while on the road, it made them feel all the more real, and who's to say they aren't? It's why stories from the road have always stuck with me, because out there in the dark, anything can happen. Anything can happen. Truckers have always, like I said, have always had a front row seat to high strangeness. You spend enough nights out there on the road, surely enough you are going to be bound to see something that just doesn't sit right. Starting us off, one driver, he was making his way through Pennsylvania, and he stopped at what should have been a simple rest stop, but his stop turned into something straight out of a nightmare. And it happens to be the first tale of the night. This story comes from Reddit user Impo Boy, who shared a weird experience that his brother had while trucking back in New Jersey in the 2000s. It was a routine haul on just another long stretch of highway, but when he started to get drowsy, he pulled into a quiet rest area between two other trucks, hoping to catch a few hours of shut-eye. And at first, everything seemed normal, as they always do. The hum of distant engines, the quiet rustling of trees. But then, something changed. And here's what he says happened. In the early morning, he heard something bang on his right door. He quickly jumps from the sleeping compartment and grabs his bat. As he looks out the window, there's no one there, but now there's a bang on the left side. Freaked out, he looks out that window and nothing but silence. He's trying to figure out what the F is going on, and seconds later, there's banging on both doors simultaneously. He said the banging was so loud and heavy that the truck was shaking. Both curtains open. He can see that there's no one out there. He quickly jumps into the driver's seat and starts the truck. He sees the other two trucks ahead of him do the same thing. He says he felt as if they had all maybe experienced the same thing. All right, very interesting. An interesting tale. It's one of those things at first you might think, oh, is it someone pranking me? But to, not see anyone out there and then to simultaneously have it hitting both sides, that's a little bit freaky. And, like you said, he's got a bat with him. So it's not like this guy is some delicate flower who's a little scared of, like some teens knocking on his door. I don't think that's the case. I think this was, and like he said, it seemed as though the truckers ahead of him were getting the hell out of Dodge as well.
Just thinking about those rest areas in the middle of the night, it seems so secluded. You just feel vulnerable. I can imagine how frightening that must have been, but it's just so strange that he didn't see anybody, especially if they're at one point banging on both sides, whatever it is. If it's a person, if it's people, some pranksters or whatever, you'd think he'd at least catch a glimpse of one of them, but that is super eerie. And it sounds like you mentioned, the other two trucks seem pretty spooked as well. So imagine if all three of them were experiencing that at the same time.
Yes.
We don't know. We don't have the other two guys' accounts. But if that was the case, that is really bizarre. Like, what could possibly be an explanation for that?
Exactly. Well, moving on to this next one, it also comes from Reddit from a user named Charlie SI, a trucker who was out on a late night run when he found himself on a lonely stretch of road. One of those places that just feels different. You know that kind of feeling where something is off, almost uncanny. A massive hill, a low dip, and then another steep climb, all surrounded by a thick, impenetrable forest. No streetlights, no houses, just a long, empty highway cutting through the dark. And it was here, in this desolate place, that he had a brush with something unexplainable. And here's what he says happened.
As I crest the hill, I see an orange van on its side at the very bottom of the hill, and a woman standing in a wedding dress next to it. I slow down and see that she is covered in blood. Holy shit. This is way before cell phones, so I slowly pass, taking in her calm expression, her blood-stained wedding dress, the undercarriage of that orange van, and pull over to the right slightly past the wreckage. Get out of my car, look back, and nothing. There was nothing there but empty, dark road. I freak out, speed home, hoping a cop would pull me over. I still don't know what I saw.
Wow. You know, hearing that to me reminds me of other famous tales like of Resurrection Mary in Chicago and stuff. To me, it almost sounds like what you would call a residual haunting. As if something maybe have happened, like, say, a tragic car accident, a young bride is killed, and some believe that moments like that, when there is a sudden burst of violence and emotion, say it's a murder or just an accident like this, and that essentially energy, almost like it repeats. And that doesn't even mean that that woman, that ghostly figure, is aware that she's there. She might not even be. She might have passed on. It's this energy that repeats and repeats. You hear about that a lot, like on battlefields, like in Gettysburg, or, you know, a famous one in Chicago is the alleyway where John Dillinger was shot down. They say sometimes you can see him run down the alleyway and then fall. It's almost like it's repeating. Not like he's an intelligent ghost haunting the place, but it's like a repeat of energy. Some even believe that even if you live, if it's traumatic enough of an event, that energy can still manifest in almost residual like haunting sometimes, even if the person didn't necessarily die. But very fascinating.
Very fascinating and terrifying. I mean, this is on the highway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's just driving middle of the night and you see a woman in a bloody wedding dress. And also it makes me think, if this is like a residual haunting, what happened? Was there a car crash on her way to her wedding? Or, you know, that is a very, very strange account.
We'll also notice that it said an orange van. Now, yes, there's orange vehicles, but it makes me wonder, was this more of like a VW Bug? Like, was this a van that was sort of out of time, like a car from an older generation? That's some information I would like to know but I'm sure he's obviously more focused on, of course, the woman than he is the car, but
he's like, that's weird, bloody bride, but I can't take my eyes off that orange VW. That's a classic.
I know. Can you imagine him running over like, oh my God, what did you do? Oh,
you dented the bumper.
Oh, come on. Yeah. Like it's, I would be interested to know if it's like a retro car or whatnot. But yeah, that's a very interesting one. Well, this next story comes from The Mirror. This tale is one that will make you think twice about checking your mirrors. In fact, it makes me think of that opening kill in the movie Urban Legend when she looks up in the mirror. You know, that's a pretty freaky scene. But picture this. A truck driver, he's part of a convoy making his way through a remote region of Argentina. The night is dark, the road is long, and then, just ahead, he spots something unusual. A woman, and she's standing at the side of the road, and her form seems slightly off. She's draped in a black dress, her figure faint, almost ethereal. Something about her just makes the driver's skin crawl, and as he passes, he checks his rearview mirror, but she's gone. Vanished. Now, at first you might think it's kind of like what we just heard in the last story, like that bride, but this one takes it a little further. Now, seeing that alone would be enough to rattle most folks, but what happened next sent this convoy into full-blown panic mode. Concerned, the trucker calls back to the other drivers in his convoy, wondering if maybe one of them saw where she went. Maybe she just stepped off into the brush somewhere, just making sure that she didn't get hit or something like that. But when they radio back, their voices are shaking because they did see her. She wasn't standing by the road anymore. She was clinging to the back of his truck. Now let that sink in. He's driving a multi-ton semi-truck, barreling down the highway, engine roaring, speed picking up, and yet there she is, holding on to the back of this rig like it's a Fast and Furious movie. As the miles go by, still she's hanging on there. Impossibly, like Tom Cruise hanging onto the side of that plane in Ghost Protocol. Until, just like she appeared, she vanished, gone without a trace. Now, this shook the convoy so badly that they decided to change plans on the spot. Originally, they intended to stop and rest overnight in a nearby truck stop, but after what they just saw, there was no way in hell they were going to stop anywhere near that area. So they kept driving, putting on as much distance between themselves and whatever the hell that lady was. And here's the real kicker. Apparently there's photos that captured this spectral woman in black hanging on like it's a Lethal Weapon movie or something. That part, because that insinuates that it is a conscious spirit.
Right.
That it's not just like a residual haunting from an accident or a tragic event. Like, this is someone who's, this lady wants a ride. I've heard of gas, grass, or ass, but this is a totally different scenario.
Right, because she's interacting with something, she's hanging on to his truck, which I don't think in residual hauntings, right, that's typical that they actually interact with something. It's usually, like you said, the same kind of event playing out over and over.
Right.
This seems different.
Right. Well, our next tale is taking us back to the dark highways of Pennsylvania once again, where one night a driver found himself face to face with something that he still can't explain. And this one, again, comes from Reddit, shared by a witness who at the time was a night driver making his way through the Keystone State. It was supposed to be just another routine haul, just another long, empty stretch of road. But he would see something that night that would haunt him forever. And here's how he tells it.
My first couple years I was a night driver, so it was hard to see things sometimes. But the one in Pennsylvania was me trying to follow a flatbedder who was hauling serious butt through the mountains. At one point I start to fall back because I can see the van starting to lean. It wasn't long after that I reached down to take a swig off the handy monster I had, and I look up, and there's a guy standing off to the shoulder just outside the tree line wearing what appeared to be some type of soldier's uniform. Looked like revolutionary. He had a musket as well. As I approach, I can see him staring right at me. And then he starts walking back into the tree line, still looking at me. Before he manages to make it through the trees, he disappears. Like literally vanishes into thin air. I had my windows down, and the air in the area got real cold. After about a mile, the air warmed up again. I had a really sad feeling come over me for a while afterward. Needless to say, I didn't stop for the rest of my shift.
I really like this one. It's It almost reminds me of the way, I haven't seen the movie in years, but like in Field of Dreams, like how they would walk into the corn, and as they walked into the corn, you would kind of see them vanish, but they would walk in far enough that you couldn't quite tell if they disappeared or if they just disappeared into the corn and you just couldn't see them. How they shot it was just so cool. And what I love about this is these kinds of hauntings too, it's sort of like a residual haunting, except they do seem to notice if there's someone there, they will kind of clock that there is another presence, even though they don't appear to be scared or angry or anything about it. It's pretty interesting, especially the revolutionary clothing. That is pretty interesting. You know, one of the famous, I think we told it before, but it's in some documentary, but when they were filming that Civil War movie with Jeff Daniels and Robert Duvall and stuff, I think it was just called Gettysburg, maybe. At night, some of the crew, they used a lot of extras that were locals, had them in their military attire, whether it was the North or South. And at night, some crew members, they had trucks and they would essentially drive people home. And so they, in the back of their truck, in the flatbed, you know, you'd have folks in their costumes and they'd get out, wave goodnight. And there was this tale about how they looked in the mirror thinking that everyone had gotten out, and there was a couple of folks still in there, and they parked and leaned out the window to say, hey, where can I take you? And they were gone. So then you have this moment of like, well, it sounds residual, but they were aware enough to get into this modern vehicle. You know, I'm just using this as for context of sometimes there is this fine line between what is residual and then when are they actually sentient. And maybe that's the line between a sentient human spirit and something that was non-human, something that was never a living spirit, something maybe, whether that's angelic or infernal or whatnot, or even some sort of earthbound spirit, you know, doesn't even, you know, I think in the West, we have a very binary thought process on, you know,
everything.
Yeah, everything. Right. If it's a spirit, it's either the ghost of a person or it's an angel or it's a demon. And who's to say? Maybe that is the case. This show is not about trying to say what's real and what's not. It's about hearing the stories. And, you know, who's to say that it can't be some sort of a woodland or elemental spirit. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Something elemental, something of the earth. That too, I think is very interesting. But
or maybe this guy just drank too many monsters. Who knows?
And it's Pennsylvania. I'm sure they've got a lot of Revolutionary War reenactments over there. This one doesn't have much of a setup, but it's a tale from a trucker who was driving through the state of Missouri. Here's what they said happened. I stopped at an off-ramp to stretch out and take a breather. As I'm smoking a cig, a little girl from some direction I couldn't figure out giggles and says, "Hi, mister." My initial reaction was, the f*** is a little kid doing out here at this time? So I talk back and say hi. She then responds with, "My mommy says you'll be okay, don't worry." Now I'm utterly confused. I ask her what she means. I get no response. Then suddenly I feel like somebody is standing next to me. But it doesn't feel negative or bad. It just feels like somebody is right there next to me. Since it didn't have a negative vibe to it, I just finished my cig and left. Later on down the road, I realized that I forgot to fuel up at my last stop when my warning light came on. So I scrambled to look at my GPS and find the nearest truck stop. I find one and set the course. As I roll up to the truck stop, my truck starts sputtering and I barely make it to the fuel line before the truck starts dying. I ran out of fuel right as I got on the fuel line. It wasn't until I was fueling up that it occurred to me, what the hell happened at my last stop? This one's interesting because in the moment, it's like as if he knows he's experiencing something strange, but it doesn't really hit him until later. Because notice he just says, from a direction I couldn't figure out. So you got to think he's standing outside of his truck. He's having a cigarette. If you hear a voice, even if it's not something that's threatening, you would think that you would at least, I mean, did he look under the truck? Did he?
Right. Did he look around at all to see where, or like, yeah, you're kind of in a vulnerable situation anyway. You kind of want to know what's going on, especially if somebody else is present.
Yes. And notice he says, I didn't get a bad vibe. I didn't feel, and therefore he was able to finish his cigarette. Now, I feel like most of us, when you hear that tale on paper, whether it's a little girl or some big burly monster, you're going to be freaked out. But in the moment, he's not afraid. And you hear stories like this about people will have encounters, whether it's UFOs or these interdimensional beings or spirits. Sometimes there is an overwhelming sense of dread. Sometimes before they even see anything, they'll say that I was overwhelmed with a sense of dread. And more so than just like, okay, this is spooky, but like an overwhelming sense of dread. Or in this case, he doesn't feel anything. He feels calm. And the theory is that some of these entities feed off of that energy, like shadow people, that it's almost like a buffet, that your scare gives them a little hit. It's a little bit of lunch, and then they go away. And in this case, if this was a tragic event happened, a girl and her mommy, I don't know if they got in a car accident, who knows? And the little girl is just going up to a guy and saying, hi, like, and my mommy says, you'll be okay. Like, who knows? Maybe there was something that the guy sharing the story doesn't mention. Maybe there's something going on in his life. And it's almost like a message saying, hey, everything's going to be okay, you know? And
right. Either way, it sounds like more of a benevolent entity.
Yes.
Especially, he felt that it was a nice presence.
Right. And even more so, he said he didn't even realize how weird it was until he had gotten to the other truck stop. It's almost, you know, it's like, does that imply almost that he's under some sort of not a spell, but the way, like, you know how the Jedi would be like, these aren't the droids you're looking for. Just almost like a, hey, everything's good. It's not necessarily a spell. It's just a, hey, everything's good. And then once he's far enough away is when he realizes, wait, what the hell just happened? It's like in the presence of that entity, it calmed him, and just to like let him know, hey, you don't need to freak out.
Right. Plus, I mean, it is a child, and it's kind of one of those weird situations you get in where you're just like, oh, it's kind of weird that somebody's here in this moment, especially a child in this context. But he probably just also didn't really think much of it, given he's focused on other things. And right. It's obviously a little girl doesn't really seem like a threat, and she didn't act like a threat.
Right.
So I can understand, too, why he wouldn't really have given it much thought until later on.
Right. Absolutely. Well, this next tale comes to us from a trucker who was just trying to make his holiday deliveries when he ran into something that took the jolly out of his holly. This chilling account comes from a Reddit user that goes by the name HardSpank916. I'll go with that. I like that. He was working as a truck driver for Costco, hauling extra toy shipments to various locations for the holiday rush. It was supposed to be just another routine job, but this trip would be anything but routine. More than strange, it was disturbing. And here is what he says happened.
We got a call that one of our locations in rural Kentucky needed to restock their giant Spider-Man dolls. They knew I was a fast driver, so I was giving the last-minute late-night duty. I loaded my truck and headed out on 265. It was around 3 a.m. when I started to have this eerie feeling. I chalked it up to just being tired and popped a couple of no-dos. About 15 minutes later, the road started to fog up. I mean, more so than any other time before or since. It got to the point where I had to pull off to the side and wait. There wasn't any other cars on the road, and I was ahead of time, so I figured I could wait until it cleared up a bit. About 5 minutes of sitting still in silence, my truck goes dead. No lights, no engine, nothing. I try my CB, but can't get anyone on. I check my cell phone, and there's no signal. As I'm sitting there contemplating my next move, I hear what sounds like a child crying. It slowly morphed into a woman crying, or at least that's what it sounded like to me. Now, I'm a big man, 6'3", 250 pounds, but I refused to exit my cab. I did roll down my window and asked if anybody needed help. At that point, the crying stopped. Then I heard what sounded like a sinister laugh. At that point, I felt like the laughter was directed at me. I rolled up my window, and it seemed like the more scared I became, the louder the laugh went. Then as soon as it started, it stopped. And just like that, my truck started back up and the fog dissipated. I drove out of there like a bat out of hell. I get to the next truck stop and pull in. I run to the bathroom and pour water on my face and ask myself, did that really just happen? I go out to the diner and see this fella in a John Deere hat, red flannel, and blue jeans. I needed to know if anyone else experienced that too. I go up to him and say, excuse me, are you a fellow trucker? 'Cause I just had one hell of an experience. He says, not a trucker, but...
And that's actually where the tale ends, so you assume he's probably going to say, but I've heard tales, many tales like this. You know, this one struck me, Gage, because now this one sounds like something more inhuman. First of all, you've got 3 a.m., which... If we go by the idea that 3 a.m. is the quote-unquote witching hour, or at least, you know, that area of time between like 2 and 4... You know, if we believe that's the case, you know.
Witching shift.
Right. Yeah, it's the witch's shift. And then, of course, obviously the crying seems to morph from a child to a woman, then to something, you know, inhuman, of course. If you'll notice, the truck dies. All of this happens. And then when it ends, the truck starts back up. That is also very, very, very common in almost all UFO cases. Typically, UFOs have been known to shut off. They can shut off electronics or engines, and then the second they leave, they come back on. It's almost as if he drove into like a pocket of some sort of a rift. Oh, you know, this is me of course, just
coming up with hypotheticals.
Yes, I'm not saying this is what happened, but like the way he describes it, if I was trying to describe it to someone else, it sounds almost like he entered this like little rift or this pocket of bizarreness, of the fog is there, the truck stops, the weird stuff happens, and then it goes away. It's almost like a little storm or like a little
supernatural vortex.
Yeah, it's like a little, it's this little vortex of whether it has to do with time manipulation or it's an interdimensional rift, but very interesting that it affected the performance of the truck, and then it sort of went away. So it kind of blends. This is something I would put under just general high strangeness, because this seems more than just a haunting, but it also seems more than even like a demonic something. You almost wonder, is this something being tested? Like something that can make the mind perceive something that's not really happening. There's conspiracy. You hear of tools that the government has worked on to essentially be able to project into the mind. Say you're an enemy soldier, to be able to like project into the mind of the enemy, like to see something that's not there, like, oh my God, there's millions of them, and then they turn and run or something like that. It's one of those that I love where it just doesn't fit in a box. Those are the best.
I agree. I like it. It's really scary. It would be a very scary thing to experience. Just the laughter. Obviously, it's coming across as something sinister anyway. But then the laughter morphing from a little girl's voice to a woman's voice. I mean, obviously that falls into that high strangeness category.
Yes.
But it's just so creepy.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like you got stuck and you had to, for however long, watch this paranormal performance, and then it just kind of goes away.
Yeah.
Like it just drifts away. Interesting. But anyway, moving on. You know, sometimes the scariest things out there on the road aren't just ghosts and ghouls. No, sometimes it's the things that exist in that murky space between the explainable and the indescribable. Kind of like what we were saying, things that don't just fit neatly into a box. This one comes to us from a Reddit user, bear_like, and while we can't say for sure if what they experienced was paranormal, it sure as hell was unnerving, and here's what they said about it. I was driving north through the mountains of Colorado towards Pueblo, and it was my first time dealing with anything like the Rocky Mountains, so I was taking it nice and slow with my hazards on and in the right lane. This was in spring, and there wasn't much snow on the ground aside from a light dusting. I remember passing another truck. It pulled to the shoulder on my way up. Nothing out of the ordinary. However, as I was heading down the mountain, which can be scary as shit in an 18-wheeler, trust me, I saw the same truck I passed earlier fly by me in the left-hand lane. Now, being passed on the left going downhill in the Rocky Mountains by another tractor trailer is wild enough. But what really makes this story is this guy's trailer brakes were on fire. He was pulling a load, I could tell because the trailer was sealed. And if you know anything about trucks, you know there's only so much braking you're supposed to do before they overheat and, worst case scenario, catch fire. This guy's truck looked like a fucking comet as he sped down the mountain at what I thought was a surely to be deadly pace. I grabbed the mic to the radio and called out to him, "Hey driver, your brakes are on fire. I mean literally on fire."
Yeah, no, you're not just doing a great job.
Yeah, that would be funny. Thanks, guy.
Driver, you're
Thanks
on
a lot.
fire.
Woo!
After a few seconds of static, a rough and weathered voice came back over the speaker of my radio and says, cool as a cucumber,
I know.
and he disappeared around a curve. I never saw any wrecked truck, emergency crews. I did see a discarded fire extinguisher on the ground at the base of the mountain, though.
Wow. Now, once again, this almost feels like a performance in a way. Like he sees the truck that's broken down. It's not moving. He drives by it. And it's like after he drives by it, it's almost like a director says, action. And then the truck goes by, blazing, and then it's gone. It makes you wonder, is this something that might happen on a route at certain times of the night? You might see this. It's almost kind of like the John Dillinger thing. But the one caveat is it acknowledged his call out. And it just said, I know. And it almost interpreted any way you want. But part of me almost felt sad, like it was someone perpetually stuck in this thing, in this loop of what happened. And it's like when he says, hey, your brakes are on fire, it just solemnly says, I know. As if, yeah, I know. Like I go through this over and over. So very interesting. Yes, it's threatening in that, at first you're probably thinking this asshole's trying to run me off the road. But when you then see, the full picture, yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those things where at first it seems like it's residual, but then the fact that it responded, it's almost like it makes you wonder, is it a call for help in a way? Because obviously all we can do is what did you get out of it? To me, it's just that it's almost like you get this big show, almost like a residual haunting, but then it does acknowledge your presence.
Right. It kind of has aspects of both in there. So I'm thinking now, yeah, he could be saying, I know, because it's like a scenario you described where he's just experiencing this residual event over and over and over. And he's just like, yeah, I know, pal. It's my daily existence now. Or it could be that they actually were shooting a scene.
Right.
And this guy just passed like they were getting a big action set piece. He's like, I know, bud.
Yeah.
We're finishing the movie.
Hey, we're shooting here, pal. Now, we've heard stories of ghostly figures on the road and unseen forces lurking in the dark. But what happens when the road itself seems to bend time? According to a story in Today, one trucker and his companion were making an 800-mile haul from Camp Lejeune in North Carolina to Lafayette, Indiana. It's a long trip, but nothing out of the ordinary for a trucker. That is, until they hit the outskirts of Indianapolis, right around 1 a.m., and realized they were running low on fuel. And that is when things got weird. And here's what they say happened next.
Growing up in the trucking industry with my dad, I decided to stop at a truck stop, the man explains. But because the main interstates were shut down due to the weather, they had to get off the highway and search for a truck stop along the back roads instead. We found a smaller truck stop. It had one truck, and it was just kind of strange. It was just a blacked out truck with a blacked out trailer. There was no real markings on it, nothing distinguishable.
Well, our trucker and his companion, running on fumes near Indianapolis in the dead of night, they finally spot a cozy little diner, seemingly in the middle of nowhere. A warm glow spills from the window, and it's the kind of place that looks like a relic from another time. And inside, there was just a waitress, a cook, and a lone truck driver nursing a cup of coffee. Now, something about the place felt off. But not in like an obvious way, but in that deep gut level way that tells you something isn't quite right. On the surface, everything seems normal, but he just couldn't put his finger on it. Still, they were desperate, and after striking up a conversation with the only other trucker in the joint, they managed to borrow some gas money. A simple exchange, right? Well, things were about to get stranger, and the witness describes the story further.
I went inside, talked to this driver, and he bought us a cup of coffee. We sat there and talked for about 30 minutes about what was going on and why we were headed where we were and what we were doing. He gave us $20 for gas. I went outside, pumped our gas, came back in, and I told him, "Hey, I really appreciate it. I'll be back." When we arrive at around 10 o'clock in the morning, it's boarded up. Looks like it's been abandoned for years, and the truck's gone. But we had just been in there. We pull in anyway and find a police officer parked in the lot. They explain what happened just hours before, to which the cop chuckles and replies,
Oh, you met the ghost of 3.
So, 2 truckers converse, have a cup of coffee, interact with 3 people at a diner that had a fuel pump. I got $20 worth of gas. When I came back, if I remember correctly, the cops said it had been boarded up for the last 25 years.
Now this, my friends, sounds like a time slip. When people supposedly enter a time slip, there is an uncanny feeling. Now, often in cases of time slips, everyone will be gone, but there'll still be things there as if people just got up and left, like there's still a bowl of warm soup on the table or something like that. But every now and then there are ones where there are beings, and sometimes they even interact. This sounds like some sort of a time slip, but it's hard to say because the cops seem to be well aware of this tale. And it's interesting when hauntings, when there is a collection of this energy, it can manifest in many ways. In theory, obviously, not just like the being itself, but an environment. A great example in a movie is in The Shining when Jack Torrance walks into the ballroom and suddenly it's not just people, the room itself is different. It's fresh paint and the carpet's nice and there's gold trim. Like it's not just entities of people or spirits. It is like the place itself is part of the haunting.
Right, because he said the diner had been boarded up.
Yes, exactly.
For 25 years.
I would say it's, and who's to say they aren't even one and the same, but it sounds either like a time slip or that simply this was a powerful haunting that not just manifested people, but can manifest a surrounding. And think about it. He actually got fuel. He was given a 20.
Right.
He was given a 20. It's like, how at the end of a movie when they're like, I'm sure it was all a dream, but then they look and they've got the coin that they were given by whomever that, was in their dream. So it's like, well, did it really happen? But in a way, that's kind of what this is. I mean, he got gas. He got a $20 bill. So that's the other thing is it was able, if this was a haunting, it was able to give him an earthbound object, a piece of paper, a $20 bill. It was able to manifest that, and it was apparently good enough to be used as tinder. So this is a very, very interesting story. When I was reading these, this one popped out to me because, it conjures up feelings of like that, Jack Torrance, a ballroom where it's the whole environment. Very fascinating. Well, this next account comes from Reddit again, from a Reddit user that goes by Good for Nothing, who believes that what he experienced on the road one night may have been directly connected to his late father. It was 1996 when tragedy struck, and his father passed away suddenly from a massive heart attack. Well, in the aftermath, his family reached out asking him to come meet with his mother. It was a heartbreaking trip, to be sure, but he never could have expected what he would encounter on his journey. And here's how he tells it.
I was running low on cigarettes, and knowing my mother was with family, went to the local gas station to get a few more packs. As I pulled into the gas station, I had the feeling that my dad's soul just wasn't where it should be. Don't ask me why, I just felt that way. As I exited my car, a homeless man approached me and asked if he could wash my windshield for a little change. I pulled out a $5 bill and instead asked him if he would pray for my father, whom had just passed away. I gave him the money and he went to praying loudly, I might add, that it kind of embarrassed me even. I looked upon his face and I felt a great relief that all was as it should be. I looked into his eyes, and they were a color so piercing blue that they could stop you in your tracks. I thanked him and asked him his name, and he answered, "I'm Irish." Well, still dumbfounded, I bought my cigarettes and went back home. Months passed, and every time I passed or went into that gas station, I looked for him. A few years later, I found him and asked if he remembered me and if his name was Irish. He said he didn't remember me, but yes, his name was Irish. The thing that sent chills down my spine is his eyes were dark brown, not the piercing blue I saw so clearly that mournful evening. I had been driving for almost a year as a commercial driver. Being from California, I hadn't had much experience in snow and ice, but 6 months earlier I was teaming with a classmate I went to truck driving school with, and he had jackknifed us in a blizzard 3 miles outside of Oakley, Kansas. So needless to say, I learned how to respect the winter conditions real fast. I was getting pretty good at driving the I-80 in all types of weather. Well, it was close to Christmas, and my mother had finally accepted my father's passing, to the point that she could smile again. I was doing short hops from Chicago to California and was totally exhausted, trying to make it home for Christmas. I pulled into the Alamo truck stop and stopped for a break. It was December 23rd. I was contemplating getting a little sleep before going over the pass, but I knew that if I did, I might not wake up for a while. I figured I would let fate dictate my next move, as a storm was approaching the summit. I stepped out of the truck to use the restroom and was walking behind a few other drivers. I was about 10 feet behind them when one of the drivers turned around and told me,
If you're trying to get home, you better go over the pass right now.
I looked at him because I didn't know him or had ever talked to him. Then I saw those same blue eyes I had seen the night my father passed away. I didn't hesitate. I turned around, jumped in my truck, and headed up Donner Pass. As I went up the mountain, I turned the squelch on my CB all the way up as to hear any new road conditions, etc. I reached the second rest area as you're heading west and stop to use the restroom there. As I left that rest area, I heard on the CB that they had shut the pass down behind me, and the snow was falling pretty good. Had I not heeded that driver's words, I would have been stuck there during Christmas, as it stayed closed for a day and a half. I made it back to Los Angeles, and after dropping my load in Frisco, my mother had a smile for the first time on Christmas since my father had passed away Christmas before. To this day, if I see eyes like that, I listen to the words being spoken. I've never seen those eyes again, but I'm always looking.
So this makes me wonder, I'm guessing not, because you would assume he would have included the detail, but it's like, did his father have these piercing blue eyes? That it's almost his father telling him? That was my thought, but you would think that if his father had similar eyes, you would think he would include that in the story. So, if that's not the case, I mean, you could theorize, is it some sort of a guardian angel that will almost, if not manifest, like say as the homeless gentleman or the other trucker, and he did that good deed? He gave the man $5 and asked for prayer, like a good deed. Or is it something like a guardian angel that takes these forms, or is it something that enters these people? Because remember, he saw that guy again later.
Right. And he confirmed his name. He didn't have the eyes, but he knew his name. It was the guy. It was the same guy.
Yes, his name was Irish, but he had dark brown eyes. Is it like a guardian angel that almost will possess a nearby individual to then tell you something? Or not even a guardian angel, but just something that was telling him, and by doing so, it will essentially quickly inhabit a person nearby to sort of tell you it's going to be okay, or you better go do this. Because that to me is fascinating, because that would imply that it wasn't just like the homeless man he met was actually like a guardian angel in disguise, or because he saw him again.
And he didn't remember him either. Irish didn't remember him.
Right. So that really makes me think, I mean, what do you think? If you had to guess, what would you say is going on?
I really didn't have any idea until you said that maybe it could be some sort of spirit or force inhabiting the person. Because that seems to be, as good of an explanation as any here. Nothing about this one really makes a whole lot of sense.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those that really doesn't fit into a box, really. It's
another thought. We brought up technology of manifesting something in somebody's mind.
Yes.
Now, this could be that as well, but maybe using people as a template in a way. What? Let's give this guy the message he needs, but let's not do it with just a voice in the void, like a little girl.
Right.
Let's do it with this homeless gentleman who is a decent person, is a kind person, and will be a comforting presence to this guy.
Right. And you would also assume that this entity, that if it wanted to, you would assume it could mask its blue eyes, but it must want to kind of give a wink in a way. Or maybe it can't. Maybe when it does inhabit, because that's the thing, is they would have these bright blue eyes. So it almost, it seems as though it is something inhabiting a nearby person set to give a message. Like a possession, but not one that is like demonic or ill-intended. Yeah, and the people don't even realize that it's happening.
Right. And I'm assuming the blue eyes are like an unnatural blue, or
right,
like an illuminating blue, because he says he's never seen them since.
Like they've had too much of the spice melange. Dune fans will know your eyes will turn blue when you've had enough of the spice melange. But moving on here, folks, that is going to wrap us up for Truckers and the Paranormal, Part 1. That's right, because there definitely will be more coming. The main sources were The Phantom of the Truck Stop by Stephen Wagner at liveabout.com. The Craziest Things Long-Haul Truckers Have Seen on the Road by Peter Rugg at Thrillist. And Truckers' Strange Encounters with the Unexplained by Brent Swanser at Mysterious Universe. And then just little clips and various things. And a lot of these sources included those. But I'll tell you what, Gage. I got a list of names that I consider very precious cargo.
Oh, yeah? Who's that?
Oh, folks, give it on up for our top tier Patreon subscribers.
Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Gray, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Serve Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, the Ghoulish Gert Hankum, the Renegade Corey Ramos, the Crazed Carlos, the Antagonist Andrew Park, the Monstrous Michaela Schur, the Witchy Wonder J.P. Weimer, the Freaky Ben Forsyth, the Barbaric Andrew Barry, the Mysterious Marcella, the Hellacious Cale Hoffman, and Pugblorb, the Poltergeist. Oh, ho, ho.
Yes, folks. Once again, if you want to be like those studs we just listed, head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast. Wow. Truckers, I think, by and large, well, I mean, unless you're like working air traffic control, but I would think if you're working air traffic control, it's probably there's so many lights that enough light pollution that it's probably harder to other than like obviously typical airlines craft that are coming in. I could be wrong, but you would think. Truckers, though, when you're out there, and then especially if you're driving through remote areas where you can see the stars. I mean, UFOs especially, I would think, they're probably number one on the list of seeing UFOs.
Right. In terms of like occupation, that's got to be one of those up there for most paranormal encounters, just for the fact that they are all over the country all the time at all hours of the day.
And it's a very isolating job. Like you are isolated, really. You're an island. You sleep in that truck. It's a lonely job in some ways. All right, folks. Well, I guess that's going to wrap it up for Truckers in the Paranormal. Gage, thank you so much for helping me read some of these creepy tales. And of course, guys, let's give it up. Creep Street Universe, let's first of all give it up to Gage. I mean, you cannot tell me, when you listen to these episodes, you cannot tell me that they do not sound incredible. And that is all 100% Gage Hurley, folks. So check out Vaporverse. Check out what he's doing. If I am the Lord of Creep Street, I like to think of Gage as the electric wizard of Creep Street. He's a wizard. He's got his magic, his electric digital magic. And he's the wizard. If I'm the Lord of Creep Street, he is the wizard.
I like that.
Yes.
I like that. Thank you.
The Wizard of Creep Street, folks, Gage Hurley.
What is your bidding, my master?
What is your bidding, my master? You're the Merlin to my King Arthur, but it could be the other way around. You could be the King Arthur, and I could just be the court jester. Maybe I'm just getting played the whole time. But folks, thank you again. We love you, and we appreciate your listenership, and we're just excited to make this thing bigger and better month after month. Please check out our Patreon. A lot of cool stuff going on, but we thank you so much. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
Good night and goodbye.